So far this year I've seen 25 new release films and I wanted to do a countdown of my favourites. Now I've given myself 2 rules, which are as follows. I can only choose films that have been released between January and June in the UK, and it's specific to the UK because some of the films that came out in January 2016 in the UK actually were released in the US in like November and December 2015. And the second rule is that I had to give it upwards of 4 stars for it to be included on this list. First I'll give you a quick rundown of all the films that I've seen this year, and then I'll go into more detail about the top 6 that made it onto my favourites list. The Danish Girl, Joy, The Revenant, Room, The Big Short. I feel like I'm hosting the Oscars or something. Spotlight, Deadpool, The Finest Hours, 999, Hail Caesar, Truth, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, Zootropolis aka Zootopia, The Jungle Book, Bastille Day, Captain America Civil War, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, X-Men Apocalypse, Sing Street, Alice Through the Looking Glass, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, The Nice Guys, Independence Day Resurgence, and The Secret Life of Pets. I actually found that I hadn't given any film a 4-star, but I did give 3 4.5 and 3 5 stars out of 5. But in 6th place it is, drumroll please, Deadpool! So Deadpool is directed by Tim Miller and it stars Ryan Reynolds as the main character. What's amazing about this film is that it was really powered by fans of Deadpool that wanted to see this film come into fruition. The director Tim Miller doesn't actually have that many credits. He's worked on short films in the past and this is his first ever full feature-length film, which is incredible. This was one of my most highly anticipated films of 2016, definitely didn't disappoint. I was a little bit worried before I went in because I was so excited to see it and I had so many expectations, but that first scene put all those worries to rest because it's got the meta humour that we wanted with the opening credits, it's got the freeze frame with the really crazy positions, it looks amazing visually and the music goes with it perfectly as well. It just does a really good job of setting up the entire tone of the film in that first few minutes. Obviously one of my favourite parts of this film was the humour because the writers and the actors weren't afraid to poke fun at the studio and say like, we weren't given enough money for this one but maybe we will be given money next time if this film does well. Something I really wasn't expecting from this film was the love story. Maybe I should have seen it coming because of the way that all the marketing was pointing towards Valentine's Day and epic love stories and things, but I just thought that was like tongue-in-cheek because it was coming out around Valentine's Day. I didn't realise that this film was actually going to make me invest in a romantic couple. I really believed in Wade and Vanessa's relationship, and that line, "your crazy matches my crazy," is just so cute. They really did a good job of making this relationship seem natural rather than forced, which has been my problem with a lot of other canon superhero relationships. The subtext ones are a different matter. In the UK this film was rated a 15, but obviously in America it was rated an R. So I expected going into this film that the action would be a lot more graphic and violent, but what I didn't expect for that to bring to this film is like a heightened sense of drama, because this film gets really dark. I noticed that while most of it is about the humour, there is a lot of real human emotion that comes from some of these scenes. Like when Wade is diagnosed with cancer in the doctor's office. The higher rating means that the villain can also be a really, really bad guy. Without going into plot details, there's a scene in the middle that is really horrible and it goes on for quite a while. So it does its job. You really, really hate that bad guy. Of course, I can't not mention one of my favourite characters that has come out of this, and that is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, who has obviously the best superhero name ever. I love the interaction between her and Deadpool and how she was just so clearly unimpressed with his antics and how that completely drove Wade up the wall. So if I loved it so much, why is it at number 6? The reason is I think after the first act of the film it does go into a very generic superhero story, and the only thing that saves it from being just another superhero film is the high rating and the fact that Deadpool is who he is and is able to poke fun. I'm really hoping that the sequel pushes that even further and goes for something completely different. In 5th place, and this might come as quite a surprise because of how big a fan I am, it is Captain America Civil War. So this is directed by the Russo brothers and it stars basically everyone. And it's like the 100th film in Marvel's cinematic universe. This was my most anticipated film of this year, and it really, really did not disappoint me. It gave me everything that I wanted, but it also gave me everything that I didn't know that I wanted. I'm trying to keep this video spoiler free, so I will just say that the airport scene is my absolute favourite thing that has come out of this Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. It gives you everything that Marvel is. It's got character moments, it's got the humour, it's got the serious beats, and it's got incredible action. Instead of being really serious and saying like, okay, this group of superheroes is going to fight this group of superheroes, they give it a sense of realism, and it really feels like when a group of friends suddenly splits and you have to decide which side you're on. And that's where a lot of the humour comes from. I didn't expect to fall in love with the new characters as much as I did. I went in expecting to be fully invested in Steve and Bucky and Tony because they're 3 of my favourite characters, and I kind of worried that all the other characters would be a distraction to that. But when I actually went to see it, I was so heavily invested in Peter Parker and T'Challa that none of that mattered anymore. I really loved the Tobey Maguire version of Spider-Man because that's the one that I grew up with, but seeing Tom Holland as Spider-Man just completely blew that out of the water. Like, this is my Spider-Man now. I went to see it a second and a third time, and both times I was just really looking forward to seeing Peter Parker again. I actually didn't realise that until Peter Parker comes into it, there isn't actually a lot of humour to it. But as soon as he comes on screen, it just completely lights up the film. Black Panther is another new addition, played by Chadwick Boseman, that I fell in love with. In my opinion, I feel like he had the best character arc in this film. He really goes through a journey and he learns something and he becomes somebody different by the end of it. In a film full of really stubborn characters for the most part, he really stood out. Honestly, this film to me was so incredibly emotional because, okay, you have all of these worldwide, large-scale arguments going on, but in the end, without giving anything away, it comes down to a very personal situation between characters that you have seen develop over multiple films and who you just want to be friends, really. The way all of that builds and culminates at the end of this film is just breathtaking. It also genuinely splits you because you can see both sides of the argument, and it's also quite fun because when you come out you can ask your friends and your family, so which side were you on? And then you can be quite surprised by their reactions. I gave this film a 4.5, and the reason is that, especially after watching it multiple times, the plot started to fall apart a little bit for me. I think it tried to tackle too many storylines at once, but it just managed to make it work, and that was my biggest problem with this film. But overall, like I said, it's one of my favourites. I've seen it multiple times and I can't wait to get it on DVD. In 4th place is The Jungle Book. This is Disney's live-action remake of the 1967 animated version of The Jungle Book. It's directed by Jon Favreau, who is well known for directing Iron Man. And it stars Neil Sethi, Bill Murray, Ben Kingsley, Idris Elba and more. This is another one with an incredible opening scene. It drew me straight in. You get the shot of the Disney castle with the opening music that you always get with Disney, but then it pulls back into the jungle and the music turns into the original score, remixed up a little bit, and it's just magical. It was a magical feeling. It actually reminded me of an old technique that Disney used to use in their films where they would have a couple of different frames and they would pull the camera back through them so that you felt like you were really entering that world. This is that technique but updated for a modern audience. First of all, the voice performance in this is wonderful. I was most impressed by Bill Murray and Idris Elba. Bill Murray because I feel like he added something different to the original version of Baloo. Both Baloos are kind of like hippies, but this Baloo felt a little bit more political in some of his lines. I guess that's down to the writing, but Bill Murray's delivery of those lines really sold it. And then of course Idris Elba as Shere Khan. Shere Khan is honestly the most effective villain that I've seen in a film this year. He was genuinely scary and it made the stakes of the film really high. For a kids film it was surprisingly dark, but I was really happy about that because if you go back and watch some old Disney films, they have some really dark moments in it, and I'm looking at Pinocchio in particular here, but there's also moments in Cinderella and there's moments in Snow White where some really horrible things happen, and the way that it's shot is really sinister. And that's the same kind of feeling that you get in this film. There were a couple of times where I jumped out of my skin and where I just wanted to stop watching because I really felt like Shere Khan was about to do something completely horrible. As for Mowgli himself, Neil Sethi was such a good pick. His physical acting skills were incredible. He looked so much like the original Mowgli. The way he was moving and running and playing, it was just like watching that cartoon come to life, which is exactly what this was going for. Of course, the visual effects were absolutely stunning. The jungle felt so real that I felt like I could just climb inside and go and explore. And the best thing about it was that I still don't know whether that was real or whether it was all computer animated. And this is the only film ever that I've wanted to go back and see in 3D, and I'm so upset that I never got a chance to go and do that. Then good old Disney, always delivering a really nice message for kids to get behind. That's what made it a little bit different to the first film, because Mowgli learns about man's effect on the jungle, but it's not completely negative. He learns to be accepting of his qualities as a human, but he also learns to be careful with those gifts and to respect the jungle. I just thought it was a really well-rounded and balanced message to give to kids. It didn't completely villainise the humans, but it also made us aware of the effects that we can have. The reason I gave this film a 4.5 out of 5 is because of the musical numbers. I did really enjoy The Bare Necessities because I felt like that really flowed with the film, but Trust in Me, sung by Car, and especially I Want to Be Like You, sung by King Louie, didn't really work for me, and the King Louie song especially completely took me out of the film. Don't get me wrong, it was entertaining. I liked this new take on the character of King Louie being kind of this gangster, but that doesn't really fit with suddenly bursting into song. But that's the only reason why I didn't give this a 5-star. In third place is The Finest Hours, yay! Now this film went mostly ignored, I think, but I really suggest that you give it a chance. It's a Disney film and it's based on a book about the most daunting rescue in US Coast Guard history. And it stars Chris Pine, Casey Affleck, Eric Bana and Holiday Granger. The story's main character is Bernie, played by Chris Pine, and he is such a sweet and lovable character, completely the opposite to any character that I've seen Chris Pine play before. He was so endearing and Chris Pine did a wonderful job of playing him. He's really quiet and shy, but he's also heroic. He's just quite humble about that. And that's something that I've not seen a lot of in films. Through the film you get to see him develop his confidence, and he just has this quiet faith where you can't help but believe that he can do it, whatever that is. The film's set in the 1950s and everything just feels so authentic. The costuming, the sets, the sort of filter I think that's in the film, it looks sort of sepia toned at times. And as well as that, the effects of the ocean are at the same time beautiful and terrifying, which is one of the themes of the film. One of the reasons why I really love this film and why it is one of my favourites is that the story is really simple. While I do love a good convoluted plot sometimes and a story that involves multiple plot lines, it was really a nice breath of fresh air to see a film that really only had one storyline and a subplot. And my other favourite thing about this film is the romance. I'm not someone that usually pays much attention to the romance, and a lot of the time to me it can feel really forced and unbelievable and just unnecessary. But the romance in this is so sweet and so innocent and true that I just couldn't help but be invested in them. And it's also the thread that keeps the whole story together. The film begins when Bernie meets Miriam, and so this really becomes a journey for both of them. Miriam herself is such a fantastic character, and I think she's definitely what brings the emotion to the story. Not that it's particularly sad or that it's particularly sappy or anything like that, but she just brings that extra warmth and that extra element that really makes a story. So while Bernie is technically the hero of the film, Miriam herself should be classed as one too, because she has as much, if not more, of that inner strength that we can see in Bernie, and that quiet confidence and faith in herself and in the person that she loves. And she's also really brave and outspoken when she needs to be. I honestly couldn't find anything that I could fault with this film, so I give this one a 5 out of 5. And if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend that you check it out. And in second place, with 5 out of 5 stars, it is Sing Street. This is the story of a boy growing up in Dublin in the 1980s, and to distract himself from the issues going on in his family, and to attract the mysterious model girl that he sees outside his school, he decides to set up a band. This film is directed by John Carney, who also directed Begin Again, and both of those films are kind of musicals but kind of not, because the story is really centred around music, so when people burst into song it's more natural than a musical would be. And I also really enjoyed both of these films, so if you haven't seen Begin Again, I'd recommend that one as well. This stars a lot of little known actors, but it also stars Aidan Gillen, who plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. This film is so high up my list because of how uplifting it was. And it's a coming of age story that really reminded me of Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, which is a book and a film. It had that same thing that just is able to make me happy in an instant. The main character and all of his friends in the band are so admirable because they just do it without any kind of fear or worry that people are going to look at them in a bad way because of it. I mean, they're doing this in a time where people are very judgmental of any sort of deviation from the norm. And they go to a very religious school where the rules really make it so that this band shouldn't be possible at all. They also have pretty much no knowledge of putting together a band. They don't have very good skills at first, and it's just really nice to see a group of people want something and go for it and not care about the consequences. One of the best things is that you get to see them really develop their music. A lot of the humour comes from that because they'll watch like Duran Duran and they'll watch other bands in the 80s that they think are really cool, and then the next song that they bring out will be very, very, very similar to that style of music. But as they build up their collection of songs, all of those influences kind of blend together to make their own individual sound by the end of the film. I think if you're a creative person, you should watch this film to motivate you a little bit, because it has this really nice message about not letting fear and insecurities overtake what you want to do. And you really see that reflected in the character of the older brother, because he is very creative, he's a musician, but he hasn't played any instruments, he hasn't made any music for years because he's let those issues and fears overcome him. And all he wants is for his little brother to not follow that same path. So he really pushes and encourages his brother to keep creating music and keep doing what he wants to do. And we're coming back again to the same reason that a lot of these films are on my top favourite list. It's because it has warmth and it has heart and it has characters that you can really get behind. It's about family and friends, and it just gives you that really feel-good feeling. So that's why I gave it 5 out of 5, and I couldn't find any flaws. And finally we have, at number 1, Zootropolis. Otherwise known as Zootopia in the US. For some reason they thought that we wouldn't understand Zootopia, so we have to call it Zootropolis instead. I don't know why. So if you haven't heard of this film by now, I don't know where you've been, but it's kind of a buddy cop kids film with anthropomorphic animals. The story follows Judy Hopps, who is a bunny, and she wants to be the first ever bunny police officer. She's not afraid to seriously dream about being something that no one expects her to be. She works really, really hard and she doesn't let anything dampen her spirits. I think Disney did a really good job of capturing that feeling of being in your 20s and moving to a big city that you don't particularly know very well, and having certain expectations of that place but it being quite different, and the realities of hard work and having to build yourself up from the bottom. It really gets that message across that everything that you want isn't just gonna appear magically. It's a similar theme to The Princess and the Frog, where Tiana actually had to work really hard for everything that she wanted in life. But even though the story wasn't about clicking your fingers and everything that you want coming true, it still had that Disney magic. I really think that magic came from the world building, because this is such an expansive place. Besides Zootropolis, you've also got the boroughs and the different areas of the world, like there's the jungle and I think there's a desert as well, and it just makes you feel like this is a real working world and that you can go and explore it. And so much thought has gone into the details as well, like how do hamsters get around and live in the same world as an elephant, and how do hippos get to work, and what are the different relationships between all of these different types of animals. It just feels like this place could really exist. So on her adventures in Zootropolis, Judy comes across this fox called Nick Wilde, and he is streetwise, he's cunning, he's wily, and the two of them have to team up to solve the mystery of why all the predators are suddenly going wild. Because in this world you have the prey and the predators. All of the animals are kind of split down the middle, and there are certain expectations of the prey and there are certain expectations and prejudice towards predators. And that's what this film does really well. It reflects the way that certain groups are ostracised in today's society in a way that's accessible for everyone to understand. You've got Judy, who has been told her whole life that she can't be a police officer because she's too small and she's too weak. And then you've got Nick, who has turned to a life of crime because that is what everybody expected of him. The thing that touched me the most in this film was Nick's journey, because he has really internalised all of this hate that has been sent towards him. You get to see him building his confidence and building his belief in himself that he can be more than what is expected of him. Something that really surprised me about this was the humour, because Disney has not only set this in the modern world, it's also drawn on popular culture and humour that comes from the modern world. And that's something that we don't see often with Disney. It's something that would happen more in like Shrek or something like that. But this film had a Breaking Bad reference. I mean, I was just so shocked, but in the best possible way. So I feel like this is a new side to Disney that we're seeing emerge, and I'm really excited to see what that means for future films down the road, like Moana. So the main reason why this is my #1 film of the year so far is because it has that magic, it's uplifting, it's funny, it has great characters, it has a great story, and it's enjoyable for kids and adults. In short, it has everything that I ever want in a film. It was really hard for me to choose between these 6, but I definitely had those 6 as a clear distinction from the rest of the films that I've seen. So I'm really interested to hear what your favourite films of the year so far are. Are there any films that you noticed that I haven't seen that I should definitely watch as soon as possible? And what did you think of my top 6? Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye!